Hello everyone, I'm here again with the second part of the chapter The Enemy. Let's see what happens now. Hannah went inside the first and moved the partition to one side. Sada was not there. Yumi followed her and kept the wooden bucket on the floor. As she saw the white man, her thick lips folded and the expression on her face indicated her determination. She said firmly that she had never washed an American man and that she would never wash one who was as dirty as that injured man. Hannah reacted to Yumi's refusal. She screamed at her that she was supposed to follow her master's orders. Yumi resisted strongly. Her dull face has a dangerous look of protest, which scared Hannah. She was worried that if the servants reported something different from what had happened, they could land into trouble. Hannah changed her expression to respect and said, "Very well." She explained to Yumi that they intended to bring the unconscious man into his sense and then they would hand him over to us as a prisoner. Yumi said that she was not concerned about their plans. She added that she was a poor person and it was none of her business to know about their plans. Hannah said to Yumi that then she should return to her work. Yumi left the room at once. Hannah was again left alone with the white man. She would have been afraid to remain there all alone, but her anger on Yumi's firm determination made her stay in the room. Hannah said with anger that Yumi was a stupid person. She said that it was just an injured man. Hannah was so full of anger at the refusal by the maid, Yumi, that without thinking she opened the blanket in which the man was injured. His chest was bare. Hannah took a small clean towel, dipped into the steaming hot water, and washed his face. The man's skin was rough due to being exposed to the sun, but it had got texture, and he must have been very fair as a child. Hannah kept on cleaning the man's upper body as she had these thoughts. She did not like the man as he was not a child any more. She did not have the courage to turn him over and thought of Sadao. Anger was decreasing and she started becoming restless. She stood up and wiped her hand with a wrong towel. As she did not want the man to freeze due to the cold weather, she put the quilt on him. Hannah called out to Sadao softly. He had been on the door when she called him. He opened the door. Hannah saw that Sadao was carrying his surgeon's emergency bag and was wearing his surgeon's coat. He was prepared to operate upon the injured man. Hannah asked Sadao that had he decided to operate the men. Sadao replied that he had decided to operate him. He turned his back to Hannah as he did not want her to object to his decision. Sadao started his work. He opened the sterilized towel on the floor of the tokonoma, a cloth, and placed his surgical instruments on it. Sadao asked Hannah to get some towels. Hannah obeyed Sadao and went out to get the towels. She was curious as Sadao was operating upon the injured man. She thought that the blood from his wounds could stain the fine mats which covered the floor on the room. So she got some rough mats from the backyard which were used by the gardener to cover the delicate shrubs from the cold weather. By the time Hannah reached the room, she saw that blood had flowed through the bandage on the man's wound and had stained the mat beneath him. Her effort was futile. On seeing the stained mat, Hannah cried that the mat had been spoiled. Sadao agreed that the mat had been ruined in such a manner which indicated that he was not bothered by it. Sadao ordered Hannah to help him turn the man over. She obeyed him and then Sadao started washing his back. Hannah told Sadao that Yumi had refused to wash the injured man. Sadao asked her that did she wash him? He did not stop cleaning him. He made fast small movements of his hands as he cleaned him carefully. Sada was engrossed in the work and did not seem to hear Hannah. Hannah wondered that Sada was not bothered who the injured man was. He was only concerned in performing his work well. Sadao told Hannah that she would have to inject the injured man with a substance that induces sensitivity to pain. Hannah replied that she had never done that earlier. Sadao said in a haste that it was very easy. Sadao was removing the packing and now the blood started flowing faster. He looked at the wound with the help of the bright surgeon's light fixed on his forehead. He announced that the bullet was inside the man's body. He wondered that how deep the wound made by the rock was. He said that if the wound was not very deep, then he could get the bullet out. He added that the bleeding was not from the surface of the skin, which meant that the wound was deep and the man had already lost a lot of blood. When Hannah saw Sadao inspecting the wound, she could not see the side, and so she coughed. Sadao looked at her and saw that her face was yellowish in color, like the color of sulfur. Sadao reacted and ordered Hannah not to faint. He did not stop his work and continued inspecting the wound. Sadao said that if he stopped, the injured man would certainly die. Hannah put both her hands on her mouth, jumped up, and ran out of the room. Sadao heard her vomiting in the garden, but he continued his work. As Sadao needed Hannah's help to operate the man, he thought that it would be better for her to empty her stomach so that she would not feel uneasy time and again. He was reminded that Hannah was seeing an operation for the first time and it was not a pleasant thing to see. Sada was irritated and impatient as his wife was under stress and he was not able to help her due to the men who lay under his knife. He was just like a dead person. Sada thought that there was no reason for him to make efforts to save the men because there was no reason for him to alive. Sadao became merciless and started working fast. The injured man moaned in his state of unconsciousness, but Sadao kept on working without paying attention to the man's pain. Sadao said to the injured man that he was free to cry in pain. Sadao was not concerned that the man was in pain. He did not want to operate him and did not have any reason for doing so. Hannah entered the room and asked Sadao for the anesthetic which she had to administer to the injured man. Her voice was clear, which shows that now she was prepared to help him. Sadao moved his chin to guide her to the bottle of anesthetic. He added that it was good that she came as the man had started to gain unconsciousness and it was important to sedate him. Hannah held the bottle and some cotton in her hand. She asked what she was supposed to do. He told her to put some anesthesia on the cotton and to place the cotton near the man's nostril. He did not stop his delicate work and added that she should remove the cotton when the man started to breathe badly. So after that, Hannah sat in a square and went close to the face of the sleeping American man. She felt sad and sympathetic towards him as she saw his thin face and twisted lip. She knew that he was suffering. She wondered whether the stories that she had heard about the torture meted out to the prisoner were true. The stories were like rumors which spread when people told them to others. On the other hand, in the printed media like the newspaper, it was mentioned that the Japanese army was welcomed wherever it went and people praised it for their freedom. Hannah recalled an officer of the Japanese army, General Takema, who was cruel to his wife and would beat her. No one talked about it anymore as he had won the war in Manchuria. Hannah thought that if a man could be cruel towards his wife, then he could also be cruel to the prisoners in his captivity. Hannah hoped that the man had not been tortured by the army. Just then she saw deep red-colored marks on his cheeks, on his neck, under the ear. Hannah mentioned the scars to Sadao and asked about them. Sadao did not answer. At that moment, the tip of his instrument hit something hard. That was the bullet. It was very close to the kidney. Sadao was not thinking of anything else. He was happy to have finally found the bullet. He moved his finger inside the wound. Sadao was familiar with the tiniest part of the human body. His professor of anatomy in America had told him that if a surgeon ignored the knowledge of any part of the body, it was the first misdeed that he had committed. To operate upon a body without detailed knowledge of it as much as the person who makes it was has would amount to committing murder of that body. Sadao's professor would repeat these words in his class often. Sadao spoke to the injured man. He said that the bullet had just missed his kidney. When Sadao would get engrossed in the operation, he would start talking to the patient. He addressed that patient as my friend. He called the injured man also my friend. He forgot that this man was not a friend but an enemy. Sadao was quick. He made a few surgical cuts on the body and removed the bullets. The man trembled in pain but remained unconscious. He spoke a few words in English which were an expression of the pain that he was experiencing. The injured man choked and said, "Guts. They got my guts." He meant that he was brave and courageous, and the Japanese army would have a tough time while punishing him. Upon hearing him, Hannah cried out to Sadao. Sadao hushed her to keep quiet. The man became so quiet that Sadao held his wrist to check his heartbeat. He was checking if the man was still alive. His pulse was there, although it was very weak. Sadao thought that it was enough for a person who had a desire to live. There was still hope that the man would survive. Sadao was sure that he did not want men to live. Sadao stopped Hannah from administering anesthetic. He turned quickly and chose a small bottle from the medicine. He filled the syringe with the medicine and pushed the vaccine into the man's left arm. Sadao placed the needle down and held the man's wrist. The pulse shivered twice and then it improved. Sadao took a deep breath as he told Hannah that the injured man would live. He woke up. His blue-colored eyes were full of fright as he realized where he was. Hannah felt sorry for him. She served him food as the servants refused to enter the room where he was kept. When Hannah met the injured man for the first time, she saw the man was gathering strength and he was full of fear. Hannah said softly to the injured man that he should not be afraid. He was astonished that she could speak English. Hannah replied that she had lived in America for a long time. The man wanted to speak further but was not able to speak. Hannah fed him gently with a spoon made of porcelain. The man did not want to eat, but still he ate. As Hannah fed the man, she said that soon he would become strong. She said so despite the fact that she disliked him, the man did not reply to her. Sadao visited the man on the third day after the operation. The young boy was sitting, but his face was pale and weak due to the effort that he had made while sitting. Sadao screamed at him and ordered him to lie down. He said that the man would die if he stressed himself. Sadao forced him down and inspected the wound that he had operated upon. He scolded the man that he could die if he tried to exert himself. The boy asked Sadao that what would he do with him now. It seemed that the boy was hardly 17 years old. He asked Sadao that would he hand over to the Japanese army. Sadao did not reply instantly. He completed examining the boy and then put the silk quilt on him. Sadao said that he himself did not know what he should do with the boy. He added that he was supposed to hand him over to the police. He also disclosed that he knew that the boy was a prisoner of war. As Sadao saw that the boy was about to speak, he raised his hand to indicate him not to do so. So thou asked him not to speak and not to tell his name, also unless he asked him to do so. That's all for today. See you in the next one.